Let me tell you about all the possible mistakes that can be made when photographing images like these so that you don't make them. Let's talk about dance photography. First, I'm gonna talk about lighting. Let's talk about balancing and controlling your lighting using a mix of hard and soft light and the use of flags to control light and metering not only to measure intensity, but also flash duration. Then we're gonna talk about model direction. Not just the direction you give, but also the direction you receive. There is also creative direction. Things like wardrobe, set design, and poses are critical. We are also going to talk about safety and why I use the gear I use on this particular shoot. So let's jump into the lighting. Why do I light this way? I lit this in terms of what the sun does. So for this shoot, my inspiration is sun coming through a window into an old warehouse style dance studio and bouncing around the room to create fill so there is detail in the shadows. Sunlight coming through a window is what I want the light to feel like, but I'm not necessarily trying to fool you. Sometimes what looks good is more important than trying to perfectly mimic natural light. But when going for a natural light look, I think it's important not to have the light doing what it wouldn't naturally do. So if light was coming through the window, it would be bouncing around the room and all the bounce would be soft and about 3 stops below the light coming through the window. So I'm using a Profoto telezoom and flagging it off on both sides so it doesn't spill around the set to give the appearance of sun coming through a window high up in a warehouse. Then from the model's left-hand side, I'm using an Elinchrom indirect square to give me a fill light about 3 stops below the telezoom. So it appears almost as if the telezoom is bouncing off a wall, and then I have an overhead octa that appears as if it's bouncing off the ceiling. These are active fill lights because they are not my main light bouncing off surfaces, but light I control the power of. Once I have this 3-stop ratio dialed in, I may raise or lower them for creative effect depending on how I'm moving around the set. Here you can see just my main light. Here is the side fill light, which acts as an accent or edge light in this photograph. And here is the overhead fill light. One thing I like to stress is that a well-placed fill light will often look beautiful just by itself. One huge mistake is not predicting where your dancer will move. After setting up all the lighting, I am also thinking about where my friend Umi is going to be moving through the set. When shooting dance, especially with more contemporary flowy movements, I want to give room to move without there being a very specific mark that the dancer needs to hit. And I really like to move around myself, like straight on for this portrait, or from the left side for this low-key portrait, or from the right side for this high-key portrait. I also use a meter for 2 reasons. On this shoot, I wanted to make sure the flash durations were above 1/3000th of a second, so I had my D2 set to speed mode. I also wanted to document my settings. Could I set this up without a meter? Yes. Could I tell you exactly the ratio I use between my lights? No. Will it save me time in the future? Absolutely. I don't always have the luxury of shooting tethered, and sometimes I simply don't want to. Now that we have discussed the lighting, let me give you some quick tips about working with dancers, because the lack of communication can be your biggest mistake when shooting dance. Dancers need to understand your lighting. Let them know what your main or key light is if you have multiple lights on set. This way they can best angle poses to work with and not against your lighting. This is also a good rule of thumb for anyone that you're shooting. Be mindful if they have a side that they favor. They may favor a side based upon an injury, or one side may be flexible than the other. Talk about your frame with them so they don't accidentally stick an arm or leg outside of where you're cropping, and communicate your frame as it changes throughout the shoot. For example, say I'm shooting full length and cropping just above your head, so if you put your arms up, they may be out of frame. Discuss if you want exact movements versus interpretive movement. For this shot, the direction was simply to act weightless, so she's interpreting that. Oftentimes, if you want an exact move, the dancer will want to make sure that it is textbook perfect, and you may get less variations, and they may only approve the one photo. After shooting the same move multiple times, I find letting dancers interpret a mood or feeling gives you many variations on a theme and more final images to choose from. But you still want to make sure there are good lines and pointed toes and good hand gestures. Also make sure to mix in less strenuous shots like beauty. Or take the time to also do simple portraits. Mixing in beauty and portraits can give your dancer time to rest as well as give more variations in imagery. Be decisive. When you have a magical jump, move on to something else once you've nailed it. Also, once you've described your lighting, your frame, and what you think will look good based upon a mood board, give them freedom to show you what they feel may be best as well. And research them ahead of time to have an idea of what they are most comfortable with. And if they have any injuries you need to be aware of. Dancers are some of the toughest humans on the planet, but don't take advantage. Let them set clear boundaries. And speaking of comfort, wardrobe plays a key role in this series. We wanted wardrobe that was dance inspired, but also gave full freedom of movement, and the boots really helped reinforce the deconstructive nature of the set, and made the images feel a little bit more contemporary. You also want wardrobe that your dancer doesn't feel will compromise them in any way, so have options, and tell them to bring their own just to be safe. In this series, the white gown was to help show a feeling of weightlessness. It had a great flow when she jumped, and I added a fan to accentuate this as well. A fan can also be a huge help to keep hair out of your dancer's face when they jump. So now, let's jump over to the creative part. This project is part of a series of images called At the Bar. Bar referencing the bar that ballerinas or dancers often use to warm up and practice. If you follow me on Instagram, there will be many more images from this series. I wanted the set to have an old warehouse feel. I'm using 2 hand-painted backdrops from Gravity Backdrops. I created a corner and opened it to about 130 degrees or so. My goal is to create a wide set with a distinct corner. The bars are a mix of 1 1/4 Schedule 40 aluminum speed rail and 1 1/2-inch galvanized plumbing pipe from Home Depot, which is more accessible but heavier. Both are really strong. I'm using medium rollers and junior stands to support them, and big bend clamps and couplers to attach them to the stands. I kept the raw cement floor because I thought it worked best with the overall look of the set. For added safety, I put a super clamp below each coupler. I even added a super clamp to the casting on the light stands for extra protection as well. And I used sandbags for the background stands. I didn't need sandbags for the main bar structure because everything being interlocked gave it great rigidity. And it worked better aesthetically. The light boomed above her has a safety cable attached to the light fixture and another safety cable attaching the fixture to the stand. It's on a mega boom attached to a heavy-duty wind-up stand. Although very expensive, this is really the safest option when booming a light this large over such a large distance. Other than a menace arm, I really wouldn't recommend anything other than a mega boom for a softbox this large. But the least expensive option is to run a gold post like I do in this video. So shooting dance is all about communication. My advice, if you have never shot dance before, would be to keep your lighting broad and simple so you aren't struggling to keep your dancer in the light, and communicate your lighting and framing to them. If you are shooting classic ballet poses, or if the poses don't follow proper dance form etiquette, be prepared for the dancer to reject them no matter how beautiful the images are and no matter how much you love the lighting. So I recommend shooting tethered, or having an easy way for them to review the images on set. Music also plays an important role, and remember to control the pace of the shoot by mixing in portraits and beauty so you don't overtire your dancers. Getting the right shot isn't always about lighting, it's also about understanding your subject. And remember, there are levels to this. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell to see more content just like this on Adorama TV. Go check it out, leave a comment. I check back and look at the comments on all my videos, even if you look at the first video that I've ever done over 2 years ago. I like to interact with you guys, so please comment. I love hearing from you.